So we have arrived in the final act of Macbeth, Act 5, and this is the place where in tragedies we see the main character destroyed, or often destroying themselves as a result of the decisions that they have taken in the previous 4 acts. And so it's appropriate that this final act of Macbeth should begin with the reappearance of Lady Macbeth, because remember, she has been in fact entirely absent from the play in Act 4, despite having such a crucial role in that opening act, where she was the one whose encouragement or manipulation might be a better word for what happened in Act 1, Scene 7. Without her, Macbeth probably wouldn't have committed his first murder, probably wouldn't have killed Duncan and set the chain of events underway that we've watched in this play. And that really points to the fact that from the moment that the king was killed onwards, she and her husband have gone in 2 different directions. Remember that in Act 2, Scene 2, in the immediate aftermath of the killing, Lady Macbeth was kind of living in a state of denial. She was kind of saying, a little water clears us of this deed. How easy is it then? She was kind of denying the gravity of what she had done, and kind of suppressing the guilt. It was an early indication that that was going to be her strategy, and indeed that was her strategy throughout the play, whereas Macbeth ended that scene saying, to know my deed were best to not to know myself. In other words, I am going to have to become another person, take on a new identity to cope with what I have done, and that's exactly what we see Macbeth doing in the remainder of the play. So they've gone in 2 different directions. They've dealt with their guilt in 2 very different ways, and as a result, Lady Macbeth has become she's been increasingly sidelined by her husband, and become, as a result, an increasingly peripheral figure in the play. Whereas Macbeth needed his wife to spur him into action in killing Duncan, she wasn't part of the decision to kill Banquo at all, nor was she even involved in Act 4 when Macbeth made the decision to kill Macduff's wife and children. So she has been a peripheral figure, and here we see her appear in the play, in fact, for the last time. This is the last time she appears on stage in this very famous scene where she is sleepwalking. Now, the setup for this is that Lady Macbeth's gentlewoman, her kind of lady-in-waiting, her servant, her maid, has called a doctor because she's so concerned with Lady Macbeth's behaviour that she can't sleep without a light beside her bed, and she wakes in the night and sleepwalks, and strange things have been happening, and so this gentlewoman has called in this doctor to observe her behaviour and to see if there's anything that can be done for her. And we remember the words of Macbeth in Act 2, Scene 2, where he said, "Sleep no more, Macbeth, does murder sleep?" And here we have the kind of literal outworking of that Lady Macbeth, unable to find a peace of mind, unable to move past the guilt of what she's done, unable to find rest, and is sleepwalking and trying to kind of work out the guilt that she has, and she knows that she has, even though it's been suppressed while she's awake during the day. And so there's some terrifying statements that she makes in this scene, which remind us of things that have previously been said in the play. So this first one here, where Lady Macbeth says, "All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand." And of course that's supposed to remind us of Act 2, Scene 2, where Macbeth says, "Will all great Neptune's oceans wash this blood clean from my hand?" And he understands right there and then, Act 2, Scene 2, no, it won't. Rather, my hand's the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red. Rather, instead of the sea washing the guilt free from my hand. Rather, my guilt will infect everything around me. But Lady Macbeth didn't realise that in Act 2, Scene 2, or at least if she did, she was kind of living in a state of denial. But here, where the truth can no longer be suppressed when she is sleepwalking at night, comes the dreadful realization that Macbeth was right all along, that there was no way for her to be free from this guilt. And here again, the statement, what's done cannot be undone. Very similar to statements that she's made in the past. For example, the scene in which she discovers that her husband has arranged for the murder of Banquo. She makes, I think she says exactly the same line, what's done cannot be undone. But in that scene, I think it's early in Act 3, it's almost kind of said to try and dismiss the thought, what's done cannot be undone, so let's just move on and stop worrying about it. Whereas here, in this scene, there's a kind of dreadful realization that what they have done, they can never change, they can never undo, they can never be free from. So it's a kind of terrifying moment where all the chickens come home to roost, as it were, for Lady Macbeth in Act 5, Scene 1. Just to skip ahead quickly to Act 5, Scene 2, which is a little short scene and not one where you need to take down particularly any quotes that will be useful to you in a critical essay. This is one of these scenes that there are several of these scenes in Act 5 where we really just see the gathering force. So Menteith, Angus, Caithness, Lennox, and these are Scottish thanes that once were part of the picture for Macbeth and Macbeth's rule of Scotland, but have since deserted him, since fled south to join up with this army that has been raised by Malcolm, and Macduff and is marching north to meet Macbeth. So just at that moment where we see the kind of in psychological destruction, I suppose, of Lady Macbeth, we're also getting this sense that Macbeth's time is up, that this unstoppable force is marching north, and the day of reckoning is approaching.